What a lovely moment it is to be surrounded by so many people with open hearts and open minds. But mostly with people who've been asking, why can't Africans just figure out a way to be productive and stop depending on foreign aid? There's a persistent toxic myth that people living in poverty don't want to work, that they don't dream of or strive for more, and that their lives are to be pitied. Perchance once I'm done, the hue that paints onto your mind's eye a blunt image of Africa as a begging continent will be changed. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have seen those images of African children whose beautiful sad eyes look up and down at the cameras, searching not for rest, but for providence. So why do charitable organizations spend millions on us to showcase these images? Is it because they want the world to see who they're supposedly helping? Or is it to obtain fell stations? Don't get me wrong. It's not my wish to denounce the brave work that charitable organizations do. I'm here in full acknowledgement that most charitable organizations do very good work and should be commended. Certainly, there are many great causes out there, each competing for awareness and contribution, so our allegiance is drawn towards the causes that truly interest and inspire us. Hopefully in the next few minutes, I shall help you understand why this one-sided production of the African narrative is an incomplete story about Africa. This compelling African story has been pruned, grafted, and transmitted for decades in an attempt to marshal sympathy, thereby increase donations. Charitable organizations might have come from a place of innocence, but unwittingly have in some cases caused harm and created a poverty industry. Don't worry. I won't bore you with the anecdote of frail raw data about Africa, or the often repeated line about the African child, of how every minute in Africa, a child dies. Let's face it, that kind of rubbish has been embellished, massaged, and molded by humanitarians until most people believe it to be factual. I grew up in a small town in Kenya, a very beautiful place. Most of the people in my community were business people, my parents included. My mother ran the family grocery store, while my father was, and still is, in real estate and logistics. It was a norm for the younglings to be taught how to run the family businesses. Every weekend, one of my jobs at the store was to restock the shelves. You see, we were raised to believe that poverty is something you experience if you did not work hard in school. That poverty is something you suffer from if you do not perform your duties at home. So with this in mind, I perform my duties diligently. Then came one dreadful day when I realized that our customers were no longer buying rice from us. Oblivious to what was happening in the market, I decided to inquire from one of our former customers why she was no longer buying rice. Without skipping a beat, she replied, "Why should I pay for rice when I can get it for free from this amazing NGO?" As a matter of fact, I'm on my way there to collect my weekly rations. That was the first time I ever heard of free food. I had to say it to believe it. I decided to accompany her to this site, only to be confronted by a long queue waiting for the gate to open. I could see some of my neighbors and former customers joking for space in line like a horde of starving vagabonds. Only they were not starving. One after the other, they passed this great divide into the side and came out, mouth ajar, with free rice in hand. Fear engulfed me as I ran back to my mother's store. I still remember my mother's words when I delivered the news about the free rice. She said, "We are finished." She was right. Because a few weeks later, it wasn't just free rice that people were getting. Free blankets, free mosquito nets, free shoes, name it. It was raining handouts. Before long, my mother's store and the ones around her surrendered to this reality. They are all closed. And with lack of income, most parents were forced to withdraw their children from schools. At this juncture, an aura of deprivation sprouted and thus gave rise to the necessary environment where all vices blossomed. People sought ways to escape this reality. Where my parents' and neighbors' stores once stood, liquor stores germinated. Without fail, these stores offered the tempting liquor that played a melodious tune that rendered the idle minds into a trance. The young girls that dropped out of school decided to seek refuge in the institution of marriage, unknowingly jumping from the frying pan into the fire. With newborn in their arms, these girls had to look for ways to make ends meet. With their youth still surrounding them, the streets embraced them. At this moment in time, the once happy African girl became prey to the nefarious foreign tourists that came to Africa not in search of its wildlife, but in the conquest of her innocence. These girls were, through circumstance and survival, forced to succumb to the wishes and perversions of these tourists. And each girl paid a steep price. Sadly, within this once flourishing African community, child marriages, illiteracy, crime, prostitution, HIV, and death became the daily norm. Instead of parents accompanying their children to school, they dropped them off at the cemetery. What bewildered me even more was to see the vast number of foreign charitable organizations that descended on my community afterwards. What still hurts the most is the sheer number of photojournalists that were there to document this portfolio of suffering. It was as if these merchants of misery were biding their time, carefully observing from their home countries, waiting for a crisis to periscope out of Africa. In 2011, I decided to visit the area where I grew up. Walking through the once promising roads felt like I was walking through the valley of death. And with each step, I wondered, what would have happened to my community if these charitable organizations had taken the time to know who we were? Because if they did, then they would have found out that, wait a minute, these people don't need free food. What these people need is a helping mind, not a helping hand. They will have realized that what my community needed at that time was knowledge on how to improve our already existing supply chain for already existing businesses. What will have happened to the African child if these foreign photojournalists had focused in getting to know them as much as they focused in adjusting the lenses on their cameras to capture the shot that bled the most? Because if they did, then they will have found out that those beautiful sad eyes housed a story that could go a mileage. And that if these African children were given an opportunity to learn, then no one could have vilified or abused them. What will have happened to the farmer who could no longer sell his produce due to the surplus of free rice in the market if these foreign organizations had focused on partnership and not paternalism? Will the farmer's children have continued on with education? Would the African child gone too soon be here today, making a difference in this world? I believe the answer is yes. Because I bore witness to the sons and daughters of Africa that received the gift of a lifetime, education. Many have asked, but Maggie, shouldn't you be blaming your community for taking the handouts? No one forced them to take the handouts. They didn't have to. You're right. They didn't have to. If today McDonald's announced that they were giving free hamburgers, the lines would be unbelievable. The people in line won't be there because they cannot afford a hamburger. The people in line will not be there because they're starving. As a matter of fact, there'll be people in line eating a hamburger as they wait for this free hamburger. People will be in line simply because everyone wants something for nothing. So what's the point? Since the law of nature is evolve or die, which makes it both easy and necessary for someone to shed the shibboleth of poverty, circumstance, and degradation. I needed to tell the other side of the African narrative, because the sooner we accept this ugly truth, the better. I'm not here to tell you not to give. I repeat, I'm not here to tell you not to give. The day that we stop giving will be the moment that we negate the highest criterion of civilization, which is the willingness to help the less fortunate people. That is, to give. I'm here to challenge you to ask questions. I'm challenging each and every one of you to hold charitable and humanitarian relationships accountable. For you have the power to rewrite this story for another child. Thank you.